Michael Williams was only 6 years old, but he already knew loneliness like no one else. The son of a powerful CEO, he lived surrounded by luxury, yet every room in the mansion seemed to echo with emptiness and silence. Until one seemingly ordinary evening, something unexpected happened. During dinner, Michael stood up, eyes shining, voice firm despite his young age. "I want Cherry to be my mom." Cherry, a simple maid who had just arrived at the mansion, froze, unsure how to react. His father, David, went stiff, fork halfway to his mouth, shock written all over his face. The entire mansion seemed to hold its breath. A small boy, full of courage, was demanding something that would change everyone's lives. Who was Cherry to Michael? Why did he choose someone so humble and newly arrived, someone no one could have imagined? How could such a small heart teach so much about love, courage, and truth? Before discovering this emotional and twist-filled story, make sure to follow the channel and dive into stories that touch the heart and inspire transformation. Michael Williams, just 6 years old, sat alone on the cold, polished marble floor of the Williams mansion, hugging a worn toy car as though it were the only piece of warmth in the vast, echoing house. The mansion was breathtaking from the outside, gleaming windows, towering pillars, gold-accented doors. But inside, it was silent. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was heavy, like a weight pressing on Michael's tiny chest, reminding him of what was missing. Each luxury, the velvet curtains, the grand staircase, the priceless art, felt hollow, distant, incapable of filling the void left by absent love. His father, David Williams, moved through the house with precision and purpose, a man whose presence commanded respect and fear in equal measure. His footsteps were deliberate, echoing in the corridors, yet to Michael, they brought only a chill, a reminder that love in this house was measured in transactions and expectations, not warmth. Michael flinched as the sound approached, curling slightly around his toy car, wishing, hoping, for someone who would see him, truly see him. Then the door opened. Cherry Stewart, the new maid, stepped inside, her movements gentle, almost timid. But her eyes were soft, compassionate, and when she smiled, it wasn't the rehearsed, polite smile of a staff member. It was real. "Hi, Michael," she said softly, kneeling down beside him. Her presence seemed to breathe life into the cold room, and Michael's heart skipped a beat. For a moment, the mansion didn't feel so large. The silence didn't feel so oppressive. Michael's wide, curious eyes met hers, and something unspoken passed between them. It was fragile, delicate, yet powerful, a connection neither expected but both desperately needed. Cherry reached out, her hand hovering above his shoulder, unsure, cautious. When it finally rested there, a warmth spread through Michael's chest that he hadn't felt in years. You're new," he whispered, his voice barely audible, yet carrying a weight that belied his small frame. Cherry nodded, her own throat tight with emotion. "I am," she said gently. "I'm here to help, Michael. You're safe now." Her words were simple, but in them lay a promise that reverberated through the boy's heart like a small, fragile heartbeat against a storm. Michael's grip on his toy car loosened slightly, tiny spark of hope flickering in his eyes. As the days passed, Cherry moved through the mansion with quiet attentiveness. She noticed the small things, the way Michael flinched when footsteps approached, how he traced patterns on the marble with his tiny fingers, the emptiness in his gaze that not even the finest toys could fill. She spoke to him softly, read stories in her warm, melodic voice, and sang lullabies that made him relax, sometimes even smile. "You remind me of someone," he murmured one evening, voice hesitant, eyes glistening. Like my mom." Cherry's chest tightened. Memories she had tried to bury clawed their way back. Loss, regret, love never fully shared. She swallowed hard, forcing a gentle smile. "I may not be her, Michael," she said softly, "but I promise I'll be someone who cares for you. Someone who's here." In those quiet moments, a fragile bond began to form. Michael, the boy who had learned silence as armor, started to inch toward trust. Cherry, the woman who had known loss, allowed herself to hope again, even if just a little. She watched him, careful, patient, understanding that trust couldn't be demanded. It had to be earned, like sunlight breaking slowly through a dense storm. David Williams noticed the change, though he didn't understand it. The boy who had hidden behind silence now seemed to lean toward Cherry's presence. There was a spark of life returning to his eyes, a small smile he couldn't hide. And in David's chest, a strange, unfamiliar feeling stirred. Jealousy, curiosity, perhaps even fear. Who was this woman who could reach what he could not? Who had the power to touch his son's heart in ways he hadn't imagined? Cherry continued to kneel beside Michael, her hand resting lightly on his, a silent anchor. "You're not alone," she whispered one afternoon, as the sun painted golden streaks across the marble floor. Michael looked up at her, eyes wide, pupils shimmering with unshed tears. "Not alone," he echoed, as if the words themselves were fragile wings attempting to take flight. "No," Cherry replied, her voice steady despite the storm of emotion inside her. "You're not alone anymore. I'm here. I see you. And I will stay." For Michael, it was a revelation. For Cherry, a lesson. Courage sometimes is not about bold gestures, but about showing up when someone is small, frightened, and yearning for love. In that vast, cold mansion, surrounded by wealth and silence, a fragile warmth began to bloom, quiet, powerful, transformative. As Michael held his toy car a little less tightly, and Cherry felt her heart swell with both grief and hope, the first seeds of a remarkable journey were planted. One where love, compassion, and courage would challenge every expectation, break down every wall, and prove that even in the grandest mansion, the smallest hearts could teach the greatest lessons. Michael had grown accustomed to the sound of silence. In the grand Williams mansion, silence was a companion, a shield, a reminder that words were dangerous and feelings even more so. Teachers' voices floated through the halls, distant and hollow. Nannies tried, politely, cautiously, to coax him into conversation, but he met them with cold, unyielding eyes. Even his father, David, commanding and formidable, could not breach the walls Michael had built around himself. Words bounced off those walls, meaningless echoes in a fortress constructed from fear, pain, and absence. But Cherry was different. From the first day she had knelt beside him, she had not demanded anything. She had not commanded, lectured, or tried to control. She had only been present, a quiet force of warmth and gentleness that didn't demand more than he could give. And slowly, imperceptibly, the walls began to shift. One evening, after the mansion had grown quiet and the sun's golden rays slipped behind distant clouds, Cherry sat cross-legged on the cold marble floor. Michael perched beside her with his small legs curled tightly against his chest. In her hands, she held a simple storybook, pages worn and familiar. "Once upon a time," she began, her voice soft, melodic, and alive, "there was a little boy who thought no one could love him until someone believed he could." Michael's gaze flickered toward her, wide and cautious, yet curious. His lips twitched, the faintest hint of a smile threatening to break the armor he had built. Cherry noticed, heart tugged, and continued, unhurried, letting the story breathe, letting Michael absorb it at his own pace. Then, tentatively, almost in a whisper, he said, "You sing like my mom." Cherry's breath caught. Her chest tightened, a knot of emotion she had long carried tightening even further. Memories she had tried to bury resurfaced. Love lost too soon, grief endured silently, longing that had never been answered. And now here was this fragile boy, 6 years old, acknowledging her presence in the most intimate, unspoken way. Her hand trembled slightly as she placed it on his shoulder. "Ah, I'm glad," she whispered, voice shaking. that it reminds you of someone you loved. Michael leaned closer, his small frame trembling. You make me feel safe, he admitted, his words small, vulnerable, yet powerful in their simplicity. Safe like home. Sherry felt tears prick her eyes. She swallowed hard, forcing a smile through the lump in her throat. You are safe, Michael. I'm here. I won't leave. Each syllable carried a weight she never expected to bear. A promise, a pledge, a lifeline. David Williams watched from a distance, concealed behind the elegant archway of the hallway. His chest ached in ways he did not understand. The boy who never spoke, who never laughed, who had hidden behind silence like armor, was leaning toward this woman, a maid, someone he had never considered his family, finding joy, connection, and even trust in her presence. His heart thudded uneasily in his chest. How could someone so humble command such devotion, such loyalty from his own son? A strange, unfamiliar feeling, jealousy, fear, gnawed at him. Sherry spent hours beside Michael, guiding him through small victories. Together, they explored the quiet corners of the mansion, read books aloud, whispered secrets, and sang lullabies that made his tiny chest rise and fall with ease, that made his eyes glimmer with light again. I like when you sing, Michael said one afternoon, resting his head against her arm, eyes closed. It's soft, like hugs. Sherry's heart swelled. She had never been hugged like this, not since the little one she had lost years ago. And yet, here was Michael, allowing her warmth to fill a space long empty. She whispered softly, "You are a brave boy, Michael." Bravery isn't always loud. Sometimes it's in trusting, in opening your heart when it feels the hardest. Michael opened his eyes, pupils glistening. Brave, like you. Sherry smiled through tears. Yes, she said, brave like you. And in that moment, a fragile transformation began. The boy who had existed in silence, isolated, lonely, and unseen, began to respond to trust, warmth, and love. Laughter, though rare, emerged like a timid sunrise, painting the cold marble walls with light. Each smile was a triumph. Each whispered word a rebellion against the loneliness that had defined his world. David, still watching, felt his own walls crack. He realized that love could not be demanded, bought, or forced. It was given freely, chosen, and sometimes the smallest hearts taught the largest lessons. And as Cherry continued to nurture, protect, and connect with Michael, he began to understand something he had never truly considered. Power without compassion was meaningless, and wealth without love was hollow. Cherry, feeling both the weight of responsibility and the joy of connection, whispered again, "You're not alone, Michael. Not now, not ever." Michael leaned into her, warmth flooding his small chest, eyes shining, and whispered, "Thank you for seeing me." And in the vast, echoing mansion, for the first time in years, a sense of hope began to bloom, quiet, tender, unstoppable. Dinner in the Williams mansion had always been a ritual of quiet control. The polished silverware gleamed under the chandelier's harsh light, reflecting a life of precision and expectation. David Williams sat at the head of the table, his posture perfect, eyes sharp, always assessing, always calculating. Around him, meals were eaten with mechanical efficiency, chews measured, conversation minimal, laughter non-existent. Michael, small and fragile, sat at the side of the table, fork untouched. He had grown accustomed to silence, to invisibility, to being a shadow in his own home. Sherry sat beside him, a careful presence, her hands folded in her lap as she watched him. Her heart ached at the sight of his untouched food, the subtle slump of his shoulders, the way his eyes darted nervously whenever his father spoke. "Michael," she whispered gently, placing her hand lightly over his. The warmth of her touch made him shiver in relief, a tiny anchor in the sea of tension surrounding him. Then, without warning, Michael's small voice cut through the formal hush of the dining room. "I want Cherry to be my mom." The words hung in the air, jagged and raw, slicing through the polished veneer of the mansion like a lightning bolt. David froze, fork midway to his mouth. His eyes widened, disbelief contorting his features. What did you just say? His voice was controlled but laced with tension, a tremor of fear hiding beneath authority. Michael's hands clenched into fists, knuckles white. I said, only Cherry. No one else. I don't want anyone else. His voice cracked, tears brimming, eyes shining with desperate hope and fear. The vulnerability radiating from him was almost unbearable, a sharp ache in Cherry's chest. She leaned forward instinctively, gathering his small hands into hers. Michael, she whispered, voice trembling. You don't have to. No. Only Cherry. I mean it, he cried, and the sound of his anguish echoed in the grand, empty room. His sobs racked his tiny frame, shaking him to the core. Cherry's chest tightened. Her own tears threatened to spill. She held him close, heart hammering, whispering, I care for you, that's all. That's all I can promise. Nothing more, nothing less. David's jaw tightened, tension radiating from every line in his body. Anger mingled with confusion and fear. How could a maid, someone beneath his station, command such devotion, such blind trust from his own son? Was she manipulating him? The thought made his chest ache in ways he didn't want to admit. Yet as he looked at Michael's pleading eyes, he realized that the boy's love was pure, raw, and untainted by expectation or greed. Cherry's voice was steady, though her hand shook as she held Michael. You're safe, Michael. I promise you nothing will hurt you while I'm here. That's all I can give. I can't be your mother in the way you imagine, but I can love you. That's real. That's true. Michael's tears streaked his cheeks, but slowly, a small spark of trust flickered in his eyes. He leaned against her, resting his head on her shoulder, taking comfort in her warmth, in her presence. It was the first time in years that he had felt truly seen, truly cared for. And in that fragile, trembling moment, something shifted in the mansion's cold, echoing walls. David sat back rigid, his mind racing. His son, silent for years, had chosen someone outside their bloodline, someone he considered beneath them, as the person he wanted most in the world. Pride, status, wealth, none of it mattered to Michael. His son's heart had spoken louder than any title or fortune could. And in that realization, David felt something unfamiliar, awe, fear, and perhaps a dawning respect. Cherry continued to whisper reassurance, smoothing his hair, holding him gently. You're not alone, she murmured. Not ever. Michael clung tighter, small arms wrapped around her, trusting, surrendering a little of the fear that had shaped his life. I knew you'd come, he said softly, almost a prayer. I knew you'd stay. The tension in the room was palpable. The air seemed to hum with a collision of emotion and expectation. In a house where love had always been measured in wealth and control, something raw, untamed, and beautiful had taken root. And for Cherry, it was both a gift and a burden. This fragile boy's trust carried a weight she never expected, a responsibility that touched every corner of her soul. David finally spoke, voice low but edged with unspoken questions and disbelief. Are you using him? The words were sharp, accusatory, but beneath them lay fear. Fear of losing control, fear of being irrelevant in his son's world. Cherry shook her head, voice firm but tender. No, I only care for him. Nothing else matters. I just love him in the way he needs. Michael looked up, eyes wide, voice small but determined. See, Daddy, she cares. She's my mom in my heart. His words carried courage beyond his years, an innocent defiance that challenged the entire mansion, the power, the wealth, and the expectations that had shaped his world. Cherry's gaze met David's across the table, steady, unwavering. Love isn't something you can buy or command, she said softly. It's chosen freely, and it's real when it's given without condition. That's all I offer him." David's chest tightened. He realized that the boy's plea was more than desire. It was bravery, courage, and a truth he could not ignore. And as Cherry held Michael's small hands, heart pounding, she knew that this moment, raw and unfiltered, was the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything they thought they knew about family, loyalty, and love. For Michael, it was the first time he had ever spoken his heart without fear. For Cherry, it was the first time she had dared to believe that love could bridge worlds and heal wounds. And for David, it was the first crack in the walls he had built around himself, the first whisper that perhaps love cannot be dictated. It must be felt, chosen, and honored. The mansion had never been so alive. Not with laughter, not with music, not with grand gestures, but with the fragile, undeniable power of a child's voice demanding what he needed most: love, presence, and a heart willing to care without condition. The mansion was quieter than usual that evening, but the silence was heavy, almost suffocating. Michael sat curled up in his favorite corner of the living room, knees drawn to his chest, clutching a worn blanket as though it were armor against the storm brewing in the house. Cherry sat nearby, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, eyes never leaving him. Each small breath he took seemed to echo in a cavernous space, a fragile pulse against the vast emptiness surrounding them. Michael had begun to act out in subtle but alarming ways. Meals were untouched, schoolwork left unfinished, and his once faint smiles had all but disappeared. The spark of hope he had shown with Cherry was flickering, threatened by the weight of a reality he could not yet control. The relentless expectations, the cold authority of his father, and the looming shadow of disapproval from everyone else in the mansion. Cherry had tried, as always, to create moments of light, reading together, baking cookies, soft laughter echoing faintly against the marble floors. But Michael's despair was growing, visible in the tension of his small shoulders, the way he hugged himself tightly, as if trying to hold every fragment of hope close enough to protect it. "It's okay, Michael," she whispered, hand brushing over his hair. "You're safe. I'm right here. Always." But safety in words was not enough for a boy whose heart had been abandoned. One afternoon, David caught Cherry in the hallway, his presence imposing, a storm contained in a tailored suit. Sweat ran cold down Cherry's spine as she instinctively straightened, heart hammering. His voice, low and edged with accusation, shattered the fragile calm. "Are you using him?" David demanded, eyes sharp, hands gripping the banister for control. "Is that it? Are you manipulating my son?" Cherry's throat tightened. She shook her head, trying to steady her trembling hands. "No, I just care for him." Her voice broke, vulnerability spilling into the polished hallway. Every nerve in her body screamed fear, yet leaving was unthinkable. Abandoning Michael meant abandoning hope itself. From the living room came the faint sound of Michael's sobs, a heart-wrenching reminder of the fragility of their connection. Cherry's chest ached with a raw, unrelenting emotion. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, and met David's gaze squarely. "Love cannot be forced," she said softly, voice quivering but firm. "It cannot be bought. I am not here to manipulate him. I am here to care for him as he needs. That is all." David's jaw clenched, and for a moment, the silence stretched taut between them. His mind wrestled with disbelief and fear. How could someone so seemingly insignificant, so outside the world of wealth and status he prized, hold his son's heart with such power? Yet as he watched Michael through the doorway, tiny body trembling, sobs shaking him, the truth became undeniable. Cherry's presence was not an intrusion. It was a lifeline. Cherry returned to Michael's side, kneeling on the marble floor, and took his small hands into her own. "Look at me, Michael," she whispered. "It's okay to feel scared. It's okay to feel angry. But I'm not going anywhere. You're not alone. We'll get through this together." Michael's eyes, glistening with tears, searched hers. "Promise?" he asked, voice quivering, almost a whisper. "Promise," Cherry said, squeezing his hands gently, her own heart racing with the weight of that promise. She felt the cold sweat of fear on her back, the tight knot in her stomach, yet also a warmth blossoming in her chest, a fragile, luminous hope that for now was enough. Together, they navigated small victories in the days that followed. Reading his story, Michael's head resting on her shoulder, he let out a tiny, hesitant laugh. Baking cookies, he carefully measured ingredients under her watchful eyes, a small triumph against his own fears. Each moment was painstaking, each smile earned, each laugh a quiet defiance against the cold walls surrounding them. David observed these moments from a distance, internal conflict gnawing at him. Every glance at his son reminded him that love cannot be dictated by rules, status, or wealth. It is chosen fiercely and freely. Yet pride and fear clashed within him. Could he relinquish control, allow another to nurture the part of his son's heart he had failed to reach? Cherry's resilience became a shield for Michael, a bridge across the chasm of his isolation. She whispered encouragements, offered comfort, and taught him that courage was not only in grand gestures, but the quiet act of trusting someone again. "Courage," she said one afternoon as they sat in the soft afternoon light filtering through tall windows, "isn't about fighting the world. It's about opening your heart when it feels impossible." Michael listened, eyes wide, pupils shimmering with a tentative trust. Like you?" he asked softly. Cherry smiled, heart tightening. "Yes, like you," she whispered, brushing a stray lock of hair from his forehead. "And like me, too. We can be brave together." In that fragile, suspended space, the mansion felt less imposing, less lonely. The walls that had echoed with absence now trembled with possibility. For Michael, every heartbeat was a quiet triumph. For Cherry, every laugh was a testament to perseverance. And for David, every glance at the connection between them forced a reckoning he hadn't expected. Love cannot be commanded. It must be chosen, nurtured, and respected. That evening, as the golden light of sunset spilled across the marble floors, Michael leaned into Cherry, warmth flooding his chest. His tiny fingers held hers tightly. "I don't want anyone else," he whispered. "Only you." Cherry's throat tightened, a lump forming. Her heart was full, heavy, and fragile all at once. "Only me," she echoed softly. And in that vow, that quiet affirmation, the mansion felt a little warmer, a little softer, and a little more alive. Tension had risen, yes, but courage had grown stronger. Love, fragile and brave, had begun to carve its place even within the grand, cold walls of the Williams mansion. And both Cherry and Michael understood something profound. Sometimes, holding on is the bravest choice of all. Rain poured outside the mansion, drumming against the tall windows in a relentless rhythm, echoing through the grand halls like a reminder of the world's coldness. Inside, the house was dimly lit, shadows stretching across the marble floors, creating a quiet intimacy in the otherwise vast empty rooms. Michael sat curled up on the plush rug, knees hugged to his chest, staring blankly at the floor as the storm outside mirrored the turmoil in his young heart. Cherry knelt beside him, her presence steady, an anchor in the turbulent sea of his emotions. That evening, Cherry had been cleaning the library, rearranging old photographs and trinkets left behind by the Williams family. A small worn photograph slipped from her pocket and fluttered to the floor. Michael's head lifted immediately, eyes widening as he crawled closer, careful, almost reverent. "Is that me?" His voice was small, trembling, filled with hope and uncertainty. Cherry's chest tightened as she looked down at the photograph. It was a photo of a child she had once loved with every fiber of her being, a child she had lost too soon. The memories, long suppressed, surged to the surface with the intensity of a storm. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the photo, her eyes glistening with tears she could not hold back. "Ah, I had someone I loved too," she admitted softly, voice breaking. "A little soul taken from me before I could even say goodbye." Michael's small hand reached out, resting on hers, warmth spreading into her heart. Like me," he whispered, eyes wide, pupils shimmering with unshed tears. Cherry nodded, swallowing hard, trying to steady the whirlwind inside her. "Yes, Michael. And now, in some way, you remind me of that love. You remind me of hope I thought I'd lost forever." Her voice was thick with emotion, each word carrying the weight of grief and tenderness. For a moment, Michael simply leaned against her, allowing himself to be enveloped by her warmth, the rain outside a distant roar compared to the fragile, blooming connection between them. He traced the lines of her face with his tiny fingers, seeking reassurance in her presence. "Ah, I like being with you," he said quietly. "You make me feel safe." Cherry's chest tightened further, tears sliding down her cheeks as she gathered him into her arms. "You are safe, Michael. I promise you, with all my heart." Her hands rested lightly on his back, feeling the rapid flutter of his heartbeat, small drum of trust and vulnerability. The boy who had once hidden behind silence now allowed himself to be seen, and in doing so, healed a part of her own shattered heart. David, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, felt a strange ache in his chest. He had always believed that love could be dictated by authority, purchased with wealth, and enforced by control. But here, in this fragile exchange, he saw the undeniable truth. Love cannot be forced or bought. It is chosen freely, fiercely, and sometimes the smallest hearts can teach the largest lessons. Michael's courage, his willingness to trust Cherry, had cracked open a world David had never fully understood. The rain continued to fall, its rhythmic tapping against the windows a backdrop to the fragile intimacy forming between the two of them. Michael leaned closer, resting his head on her shoulder, the warmth of her presence filling the hollow spaces within him. For the first time in years, he felt truly understood, truly safe. Cherry's hands lingered on his small ones, holding him gently, feeling the tremor in his fingers and the rapid flutter of his pulse. Each beat was a reminder of the fragile beauty of life, of love chosen and nurtured in the most unexpected of places. "You've been through so much, Michael," she murmured, voice thick with emotion. "But you're not alone anymore. Not now, not ever." Michael tilted his head, eyes shimmering with trust. "You will stay." "I will stay," Cherry promised, holding his gaze, heart pounding, a mixture of grief, hope, and resolve coursing through her veins. "I am here, and I will not leave." David watched silently, a newfound respect and understanding dawning in his eyes. The boy who had been silent, the woman who had endured loss, had created something more powerful than wealth, authority, or expectation, a bond forged in courage, trust, and love. That night, as rain streaked the windows and shadows danced across the marble floors, Michael and Cherry sat together in quiet companionship. Each heartbeat, each whispered promise, each shared glance was a victory against the cold, imposing world outside. And in that fragile space, they both realized a profound truth. Love chosen freely, with courage and care, has the power to heal, transform, and endure beyond any past loss. The mansion felt warmer, quieter, and more alive than it had in years. And Michael, nestled safely in Cherry's embrace, finally understood that some connections, born of empathy, resilience, and mutual courage, can redefine the very meaning of family. The mansion felt unusually tense that morning, the grand halls echoing with the subtle hum of anticipation. Michael sat perched on the edge of the velvet sofa, his small hands clasped tightly together, eyes wide with apprehension. Cherry knelt beside him, her presence steady, offering silent reassurance. Outside, sunlight attempted to pierce the gray sky, but inside, the air was thick with expectation, heavy with the storm about to break. Margaret Williams, David's mother, swept into the room like a tempest, her face flushed and eyes blazing with indignation. "This is unacceptable," she snapped, voice cutting through the silence like a knife. Her hands trembled, knuckles white, as she glared at Cherry. "A maid cannot be family. A maid cannot raise a Williams child." Michael's small fingers dug into the folds of Cherry's dress, voice trembling yet defiant. "She is my mom," he shouted, his words bold, echoing through the vast living room. His chest heaved as tears welled up, yet the courage in his tiny heart radiated with undeniable strength. The mansion seemed to shiver with the intensity of the moment, as though even the walls recognized the truth in his proclamation. Cherry's hands went cold, her heart pounding like a drum in her chest. She knelt beside Michael, voice steady despite the fear that surged like ice through her veins. "Michael," she whispered softly, brushing his hair from his tear-streaked face, "you've been so brave. Your heart is stronger than anyone thinks. I'm proud of you." Margaret's lips tightened, a thin line of fury and disbelief. She turned sharply to David, eyes wide with incredulity. "Have you lost your mind? The world will hear of this. Your son, he's choosing her over his own family." David swallowed hard, chest tightening. He felt the weight of legacy pressing down, of social expectation, of the judgment of his peers. Yet as he looked at Michael, small and resolute, his eyes shining with the purest form of courage, something shifted. The boy's voice, though tiny, was stronger than any command he had ever given. The truth was undeniable. Love cannot be forced, dictated, or purchased. It is chosen freely by those who feel it in their hearts. Cherry held Michael's hands, feeling the rapid flutter of his pulse, the small tremor in his fingers, the quiet courage radiating from his body. "Margaret," she said calmly, yet with quiet strength, "love is not measured by wealth or title. It is measured by heart. Michael has chosen me. That is his right, and I will honor that." The room fell silent, the tension thick, almost suffocating. Margaret's gaze softened slightly as she looked at Michael, who now stood taller despite his small frame, eyes glimmering with hope and resolve. His courage was contagious, a quiet force that demanded recognition. You don't understand," she whispered, voice breaking. "He is the future of this family. He must not be influenced like this." Michael took a tentative step forward, voice trembling yet unwavering. "I'm not being influenced," he said firmly. "I know what I feel. I know who I need. Cherry is my mom. Even if you don't believe it, she is my family. She's the one who makes me feel safe, who loves me for who I am." His words hung in the air, charged with emotion, each one a defiance of the mansion's cold walls, each one a testament to the bravery of a small heart. Cherry felt her chest swell with a mix of fear, relief, and triumph. She knelt and embraced Michael gently, whispering in his ear, "You are stronger than you know, Michael. Your heart is your guide, and it has chosen wisely." His arms wrapped around her in return, tight and trusting, their connection deepening with each heartbeat. David watched, breath catching in his throat. He realized the magnitude of the lesson before him. His son, long silent and withdrawn, had found his own voice, his own courage. The world, society, and even family tradition could not dictate the choices of the heart. And in that moment, David felt a pang of humility and awakening. Perhaps Cherry, this woman outside his world of wealth and status, had given his son what he himself never could. As if the mansion itself recognized the shift, the air seemed to lighten, the silence now charged with possibility rather than emptiness. Reporters' cameras had begun to flash outside, their lenses capturing the story that would soon make headlines. CEO's son chooses the maid as his mother. The world might question, the society might judge, but Michael's courage had carved a path that could not be denied. Cherry looked at David, her gaze steady, yet gentle. He has shown us all something important, she said softly. Love cannot be bought. Love cannot be commanded. Love is chosen, and sometimes the smallest hearts teach the greatest lessons. David nodded slowly, the first cracks of vulnerability appearing on his stoic face. He stepped forward, hand reaching toward Michael, eyes glimmering with emotion he could no longer hide. I see it now, he murmured. Perhaps he was right all along. Michael's tear-streaked face broke into a small, triumphant smile. Cherry's heart swelled, a mixture of relief and joy flooding her chest. Margaret, still shaken, softened slightly, though pride and disbelief battled within her. For the first time, the mansion felt alive, not with grandeur or wealth, but with courage, love, and the unyielding truth of a child's choice. Cherry whispered to Michael, voice low but certain, "You are safe. You are loved. And you are brave beyond measure." And in the quiet chaos of that living room, hearts opened, barriers fell, and the mansion, so long cold and imposing, began to feel like home, a place where love, courage, and family were defined not by blood or status, but by the strength of the heart and the bravery to choose it. Cherry had made her decision. The mansion, once a sanctuary of warmth between her and Michael, now felt like a cage of fear and impossible choices. She could no longer ignore the pressure, the disapproval, the judgment that hovered like storm clouds over every step she took. Leaving seemed the only way to protect Michael, from gossip, from family expectations, from the harsh scrutiny of a world that could not understand the bond they shared. Her chest tightened with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. The knot in her stomach grew with every heartbeat. Michael, sensing the change, sat quietly in the living room, small shoulders hunched, eyes flickering with worry. The warmth that had been building between them seemed to waver, fragile as a candle flame in a gust of wind. "You're leaving," he whispered, voice trembling, eyes wide with fear. His tiny fingers clutched at his blanket, as though trying to anchor her presence. Cherry knelt before him, hands resting gently on his shoulders. "Michael, I'm doing this to keep you safe," she murmured, voice choked. "I have to go now, so nothing can hurt you." Her heart ached with every word. She could feel the rapid flutter of his pulse, the small shiver running through his body, the tight knot of fear gripping his chest. She had never known a decision could feel so heavy. His small legs trembled as he stood, voice cracking. "No, don't go. I need you. You can't leave me." Tears streamed down his cheeks, and the mansion seemed to shake with the intensity of his plea. His words were raw, desperate, and full of courage, the courage of a child who refused to be abandoned again. Cherry froze, caught between fear and love, knowing that staying might risk judgment or ruin, but leaving would shatter the fragile hope Michael clung to. She looked into his tear-streaked eyes and felt the weight of her choice pressing down. Her own chest tightened, cold sweat on her back, a lump forming in her throat. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to protect herself, but her heart, now intertwined with his, refused to let go. Suddenly, David appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, panic flickering across his usually composed face. He had never seen his son like this, so bold, so vulnerable, so fiercely alive in his need for love. "Cherry," he called out, voice raw, stepping closer. "Wait, maybe he was right all along." The words were tentative, heavy with a dawning realization. The walls around his heart, so long armored with authority and control, began to crack. Michael's gaze lit up, hope igniting like a fragile sunrise in his chest. "See? I told you. Don't go," he cried, small arms reaching toward her, shaking, yet full of conviction. Cherry felt a rush of emotion, relief, fear, and love, crashing together like waves against the shore. She saw in David's eyes a vulnerability she had never witnessed, a willingness to recognize that sometimes the heart knows more than wealth, status, or tradition ever could. She extended her hand toward Michael, and he grasped it firmly, little fingers curling around hers. His heartbeat raced against her own, a symphony of trust and courage. "Ah, I'm here," she whispered, voice trembling but steady. "I'm not leaving. Not now, not ever." David stepped forward, his usually commanding presence softened, eyes glimmering with newfound understanding. "Stay with us, not as an employee, but as family," he said, voice gentle, carrying a weight of authority transformed into acceptance. The words felt heavy and light all at once, a bridge between fear and possibility. Cherry glanced at him, hesitating for a heartbeat, weighing the risk, the fear, the consequences. But then she looked at Michael, tear-streaked, trembling, eyes bright with trust and courage. And she realized something profound. Love sometimes demands that you leap into the impossible, that you choose connection over comfort, courage over certainty. Michael's small arms tightened around her waist, clinging, and she hugged him back, feeling the warmth of his body, the rapid beating of his heart against hers. The mansion, once echoing with silence and control, now seemed alive with a new energy. Hope radiated from the two of them, fragile but unstoppable. David watched, chest heavy, mind racing. He understood now that wealth and power could never create the bonds that love and courage could. Michael's bravery in demanding what his heart needed had forced a reckoning, a realization that family is not defined by status, but by choice, heart, and unwavering loyalty. Cherry felt tears slide down her cheeks, a mixture of relief, triumph, and the lingering ache of fear. "You're safe, Michael," she whispered, pressing a kiss to his forehead. "And I promise I'm not going anywhere. We'll face everything together." Michael smiled through his tears, a small, radiant expression that spoke volumes of trust, courage, and love. "I knew you'd stay," he murmured, voice soft but steady, "because you're my mom." In that quiet, tense, and sacred moment, the mansion transformed. The cold walls, the echoes of absence, the weight of tradition, they all faded in the presence of love chosen freely, of courage demonstrated by a small child and embraced by a woman who had learned to trust her heart again. Cherry realized in the depth of her soul that this was the turning point, not just for Michael, but for herself and even David. A choice had been made, fear confronted, and the impossible had been met with unwavering bravery. Love, fragile and fierce, had triumphed. And as the rain outside the windows softened to a gentle drizzle, the three of them stood together, hands entwined, hearts aligned, courage renewed, ready to face whatever the world might throw at them, together as a family defined not by blood, but by heart, choice, and the unshakable bond forged in the most unexpected of places. The morning sun filtered gently through the tall windows of the Williams mansion, casting long golden stripes across the marble floors. The house, once cold and echoing with absence, now vibrated softly with a fragile sense of hope and anticipation. Cherry sat at the edge of the grand sofa, hands folded in her lap, heart pounding with the weight of the decision she had carried for days. Every instinct screamed at her to protect herself, to leave the mansion before the world's judgment and expectation could reach her. Yet every heartbeat pulled her toward Michael, toward the bond that had grown between them, delicate and unbreakable. Michael approached her slowly, small footsteps light against the polished floors, eyes shining with determination. "Cherry," he said softly, voice quivering but full of conviction, "you don't have to decide. I already know. You're my mom, even if no one else believes it." His tiny hand reached out, trembling, and she took it immediately, feeling the rapid flutter of his heartbeat against her own. The warmth of his trust wrapped around her like a shield, and for a moment, fear melted into clarity. Cherry's chest tightened as she looked at him, tears welling in her eyes. The boy who had once hidden in shadows, who had refused to speak or smile, now stood before her full of courage, trusting her with a place in his heart that no one else could touch. She knelt to meet his gaze, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Michael," she whispered, voice trembling, "you've given me more than I could ever hope for. Your trust, your courage, it's the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." David entered the room quietly, observing the exchange with a mixture of awe, humility, and a newly awakened understanding. His chest tightened, and for the first time, he felt the weight of expectations, societal pressure, and legacy in contrast to the simple, pure courage of a child. He took a deep breath, eyes glimmering, voice soft but firm. "Cherry, stay. Not as an employee, not as someone fulfilling duty, but as family. With us. Here. Always." Cherry's heart surged with emotion, a tidal wave of relief, joy, and love. She glanced at Michael again, and his small smile, radiant and fearless, anchored her decision. Every doubt, every fear, every judgment faded in the presence of this tiny, brave heart that had taught her the true meaning of courage and family. "Ah, I will stay," she said softly, letting her voice carry the weight of her choice. "I will stay, and I will be here for you. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because I love you." Michael's laughter, small but filled with victory and relief, echoed through the mansion like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. He ran into her arms, hugging her tightly, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat and the warmth that now surrounded him. "I knew you would," he whispered into her shoulder. "I knew you wouldn't leave me." David approached and knelt beside them, placing a hand on Michael's shoulder. "You've both taught me something I'll never forget," he said quietly, voice thick with emotion. "Family isn't defined by blood or wealth or status. Family is chosen. Family is courage, love, and the willingness to care for one another without condition." Cherry's hand squeezed Michael's gently, feeling the rapid pulse of his tiny heart. "And family," she whispered, "is sometimes found in the most unexpected places. Courage, hope, and love are what truly matter." The mansion seemed to breathe along with them, walls no longer cold and imposing, but softened by laughter, trust, and the quiet power of chosen love. Michael, Cherry, and David sat together, hands entwined, hearts aligned, feeling a profound sense of safety, belonging, and triumph. The boy's bravery, Cherry's resilience, and David's awakening had transformed a house of silence into a home alive with warmth and connection. Cherry leaned back slightly, glancing at the sprawling mansion that had once felt lonely and empty. "We did it," she murmured, voice filled with wonder and gratitude. "We built something stronger than walls, stronger than rules. We built family." Michael's small fingers intertwined with hers, squeezing gently. "Family," he echoed, a bright smile illuminating his face, "is the heart you choose." David, standing behind them, nodded with a quiet smile. He understood now that the lessons learned in these fragile moments, love, courage, and the choice to trust, would shape not just their lives, but the very meaning of home. And in that moment, the mansion was no longer just a house. It was a sanctuary of hearts united by courage, resilience, and love freely given and freely chosen. Every corner resonated with the truth that family is not about blood or wealth, but about bravery, trust, and unwavering devotion. Cherry, Michael, and David shared a long, quiet embrace, feeling the victory of love prevailing over fear, doubt, and expectation. The mansion echoed with the smallest but strongest heartbeat of all: courage chosen, love shared, and a family forged not by circumstance but by heart. And as they stood together, triumphant yet humble, one truth shone brightly: sometimes the bravest choice is to stay, to love, and to believe in the impossible. If you were moved by Michael and Cherry's story and want to see more tales of courage, heart, and unexpected triumph, make sure to follow our channel. Every story is a reminder that love, resilience, and bravery can change lives, and perhaps even your own.